Senator Cotton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, gentlemen, for your appearance today. I'd like to say a few words about the topic Senator Jones addressed, a bill that we've introduced, the Small Business Audit Correction Act. The bill would correct one of the unintended consequences of Dodd-Frank, specifically the massive increase in audit costs for small, non-custodial broker-dealers. This is a big problem. In hindsight, I think it's clear that Congress overshot the mark trying to prevent another Bernie Madoff-style scandal when it extended the Public Company Accounting Oversight Board audit requirements to these small, non-custodial broker-dealers. As a result, public company audit rules for gigantic firms now apply to firms that don't hold customer assets and couldn't even pull off a Madoff scam if they wanted to in the first place. Now, this requirement might seem harmless or obscure, but in fact, it's increased costs for small broker-dealers a lot. One Arkansas broker told me that his audit costs have gone from $6,000 to $30,000, and he has only 5 employees, and his offices are much smaller than the room in which we now sit. That's not an isolated incident to Arkansas either. I would venture that every member of the Banking Committee has constituents just like mine. And when you think about it, this is a classic square peg into a round hole problem. As one board-registered audit firm wrote in a letter, the board audit requirement makes sense for public companies like Apple and broker-dealers that carry customer funds or securities like Morgan Stanley because the investing public and markets are potentially at much greater risk from these companies. Conversely, the board requirements make no sense for privately held, small, non-custodial firms that do not carry customer funds or securities, companies like mine. Currently, a 3-person small business is held to the same standards as Merrill Lynch. This is not right, fair, or reasonable. As he wrote, in other words, it's the big guys, the custodial firms, that should be receiving the Public Company Accounting Board audit, not these little guys. Both the SEC and the board have said that they have no data to suggest that this requirement has created a healthier, safer investment environment. In fact, even board-registered audit firms, whom you'd think would be in favor of this requirement, are speaking out against it. But it shouldn't be a surprise they're losing business as small brokers die out. That's why my legislation with Senator Jones would make a simple change. It would exempt the small, privately held, non-custodial firms in good standing from this board requirement and allow them to file their financial statements according to GAAP standards they used just a few years ago. It's true regulators like the SEC and FINRA could relieve some of this compliance burden themselves, but they could also reverse that decision later on. I think our small broker-dealers deserve the regulatory certainty that will only come from a change in the law. I think this is simply common sense, and I know it has widespread support. We've heard from many organizations who have sent letters of support, and as far as I know, there are no organized groups opposed. So to sum up, I believe these unnecessary regulations are crushing our small broker-dealers and holding back economic growth, particularly in states like Arkansas. If we pass our bill, we can help lighten the load a little bit and allow more Americans to invest their money with small, local broker-dealers if that is their choice. I address the question first to you, Mr. Keating. Do you feel that these small, non-custodial firms, perhaps more importantly, their customers, would benefit from returning to this kind of right-sized audit standard?
Yeah, of course, I would agree with you 100%. I think you laid it out very well, and I think this legislation makes sense, and I think any kind of scaling to fit the size of the business has to be thought about when we're moving ahead with legislation and when folks like the SEC are moving ahead with what they're, in terms of the regulatory burdens they put on things. And that speaks to just a larger regulatory issue of can we, we need some institutional reforms in addition to fixes like this so we don't have to come back and keep doing this. Cost-benefit analysis. Why is, the SEC, there's a bill in the House, 78, where the SEC would be required to do cost-benefit analysis and look at the impact on small businesses and market liquidity and so on. So I think this makes perfect sense, and I think we need to take the next step and say, how do we stop the overshooting that you talk about?
And Professor Bullard, you share that opinion?
I share the opinion on the bill, yes.
Thank you. My time has nearly expired. I do hope this committee can mark up our legislation and then move it to the floor for a committee vote, as well as some of the other meritorious bills we have passed. As our witnesses have made clear today, too, I think this is another good example of working together in a bipartisan fashion. I know we don't have unanimous support for this legislation, but that's pretty rare around here, but we do have healthy support from both Democrats and Republicans, and I want to thank the chairman and the ranking member for trying to move ahead with additional and important legislation in this Congress.
Thank you.